Streaming from Abbey Cat Recording Studio in Chicago.
You are listening to Influenced, a podcast where we explore what makes great music influential. Welcome to the latest episode of the second season of Influenced. I'm Blake Sokoloff.
And I'm Robert Dean.
And this week, we're doing kind of the queen of country rock, Linda Ronstadt. And she definitely got her start in the late 60s, early 70s, and kind of pretty quickly became one of the, biggest powerhouse vocalists, and certainly one of the biggest female vocalists to come out of the late 60s, kind of early 70s years, kind of post Janis Joplin, Grace Slick. She got her start in the kind of late 60s in a kind of very folk rock kind of 60s band called the Stone Poneys, based out of LA. I mean, she was born in Tucson, Arizona, but she kind of got out of there as soon as she graduated from school.
She was really young. She was 18, and she connected with this guy, Bobby Kimmel.
Yeah.
And put the Stone Poneys together.
And I know the other musician in the band, Kenny Edwards, the bass player, would kind of go on to play in Linda's solo band once she went solo, which happened pretty quickly. After the band had their kind of single hit as a group, Different Drum, off their second album, Evergreen Volume 2, which I believe released in 1967. But the band pretty quickly went their separate ways after they released a few albums. Like, the group originally started out as kind of one of those classic 60s harmony groups, sort of similar to the Mamas and Papas, or it wasn't like one member was featured heavily. And then Different Drum kind of changed all that because that song really, really features Linda Ronstadt's super powerful vocals. And then all the producers and kind of everyone around the band, their managers and things, started really just put the spotlight on Linda, which kind of left a bad taste in the other band members' mouths, kind of almost to the point that their last album, the Stone Poneys' last album, was actually credited to Linda Ronstadt and the Stone Poneys, which I don't think was necessarily the intention of the other two band members. So the band pretty quickly kind of melted away to make room for Linda's solo career. But here I will play their one hit, Different Drum, off of Evergreen Volume 2 from 1967 by the Stone Poneys. So here you go.
Yeah, big breakthrough hit for Linda Ronstadt and Stone Poneys together, but number 13 in the U.S. and one of 21 top 40 hits for Linda over the years.
Yeah, I mean, she had quite the chart career throughout her whole recording career, for sure. She's definitely like a very, very big chart mainstay. But that song is always a little bit funny to me too, because it's a very 60s song. Like it sounds like it could almost be like a Zombies track or something like that. It definitely doesn't really pay a lot of attention to Linda's actual influences. Like, she was very inspired by like a lot of the early 50s kind of rockabilly crooners like Roy Orbison and Buddy Holly. She kind of famously covered both a song by both of those artists. She covered That'll Be the Day by Buddy Holly and Blue Bayou, of course, by Roy Orbison, which actually kind of became one of her sort of signature songs. Kind of immediately after the Stone Poneys breakup in like the late 60s, like 1969, 1970, she pretty much immediately embarked on a solo career. And her solo career in the early 70s was very much kind of like figuring out exactly what her sound would be. She would obviously become ultimately famous for that very heavy country rock influence, and she was kind of discovering that on her early solo albums. And I'll play a song off of her 1970 solo album, Silk Purse. This song is Long, Long Time, but it's one of her first kind of songs where she started getting some airplay around kind of California and the West Coast, and began sort of a heavy touring schedule around kind of the West Coast. And here's Long, Long Time off of her 1970 album, Silk Purse, just real quick, just to kind of give you a taste of what her early solo career was starting to kind of shape into.
Sounds like good advice, but there's no one at my side, and time washes clean love's wounds unseen. That's what someone told me, but I don't know what it means, 'cause I've done everything I know to try and make you mine, and I think I'm gonna love you.
Yeah, and you can really, the showcasing of her vocal and the huge Linda Ronstadt vocal just coming through.
That was the kind of thing I feel like they kind of knew to highlight immediately as
Right.
soon as her solo career started. Like that song doesn't really have, it has a little bit of that like soft touched acoustic guitar and things like that, but that song reminds me more of like a kind of a Nancy Sinatra or a Dusty Springfield song than it would like a country kind of track. And I do think a lot of her country influence kind of came from a lot of the musicians that she was kind of surrounding herself with in the early 70s, when she was kind of doing a lot of these West Coast small tours and things like that. And so kind of I would say kind of most famously in 1970 to kind of 71, she was kind of forming a new band for her solo tours and everything. And she needed a guitarist, a rhythm guitarist who could sing, and kind of she was looking for everyone she wanted to kind of get in on some backing vocals. So she was kind of like anyone who joined the band needed to be able to sing. So she was looking for like a singing drummer, and she found a pretty good singing drummer and a guy she found just playing around some bars. Named Don Henley, and a rhythm guitarist named Glenn Frey.
Yeah.
She kind of was honestly the catalyst who. I mean, honestly, you could probably say Linda Ronstadt kind of created the Eagles, especially because she was actually the one who knew Bernie Leadon before Don Henley and Glenn Frey knew Bernie, because she had kind of knew him from being kind of a session player and things like that.
And he did some work for her too,
He did do some work for her, like playing on some of her songs and early work and things like that. And so the Eagles kind of formed as peers of Linda Ronstadt, and kind of at the tail end of one of the tours that Glenn and Don were doing with Linda, they kind of came to her and were like, "Hey, Linda, we might want to kind of form our own band. Is that okay?" And they kind of were expecting her to not be super into it because she'd be losing a couple players. Great players.
Yeah.
They were super surprised in that like she was super into it. She wanted to hear some of the songs they were working on. She was like, she kind of became a major Eagles supporter. And while the Eagles' first album did really, really well, they had a lot of pop-off hits with Peaceful Easy Feeling and things like that. Their second album, just self-titled Desperado, kind of didn't hit the way they really wanted it to when it first came out. Like their record label kind of sort of famously labeled it like a cowboy album, and they didn't really know how to promote it kind of until Linda Ronstadt in 1973 on I think it's her third or fourth solo album, Don't Cry Now, from 1973. She covered Desperado without telling any of the other guys in the Eagles, and it kind of, I mean, her Desperado became a big hit for her, and it also kind of made that song and that album a standout cut for the Eagles, because the Eagles song Desperado was never even released as a single in the Eagles' lifetime. So the way that song kind of became an iconic song is definitely through Linda Ronstadt's version. So I'll play it here real quick just for a little bit. Here's Linda Ronstadt's Desperado off her 1973 album Don't Cry Now.
Desperado, why don't you come to your senses? You've been out riding fences for so long now. Oh, you're a hard one, but I know that you got your reasons. These things that are pleasing you will hurt you somehow. Don't you try the queen of diamonds, boy, she'll beat you if she's able. The queen of hearts is always your best bet.
Yeah, really interesting that Linda Ronstadt's version there made the Eagles hit for them, which is kind of interesting because otherwise you think about how iconic of a song it is for the Eagles.
Oh, definitely.
And otherwise that would have been some deep cut song on their second album just buried down in there.
Linda's association with the Eagles and a lot of their kind of peers was definitely a major thing for her career, because after her that third solo album, by the time she got to kind of her breakthrough album, Heart Like a Wheel, she was surrounding herself with a lot of the kind of contemporary kind of country rock musicians that were all kind of centered around LA at that point. Like, she was covering and hanging out with Jackson Brown. She actually had a fairly deep and romantic relationship with J.D. Souther. Right. They kind of had an on and off thing for a long time. And of course her friendship with the Eagles and all those guys. But that also started a big upturn in like the quality of songs that she was recording, because Linda Ronstadt, she's never really been like a main, like songwriting has never been her main thing. She's often co-written songs with other writers and things like that, but she's never been a songwriter much herself, in that she was mainly just trying to display her vocals and find songs that she loved and really connected with, and create versions of the songs that she really loved. So she started recording a ton of Jackson Brown songs and J.D. Souther songs and various other songs written by a lot of that kind of crew of various kind of country rock and rock musicians in LA and around that kind of scene at the time. In 1974, she partnered with the producer Pete Asher, who was kind of a big name, also just like a big name producer around kind of the LA scene at that time. She kind of started what many people kind of see as her like golden string of albums, or she had like a good 3 or 4 albums, from her album Heart Like a Wheel to Prisoner in Disguise to Hasten Down the Wind to Simple Dreams. Like, each one of those albums had massive hits, and a lot of those albums would reach number 1 or the top 10 Billboard charts. And You're No Good, the song I'm going to play real quick off Heart Like a Wheel from 1974, was actually her first, and I think it was her only number 1 song. Yeah. She had a number of number 1 albums, of course, but You're No Good kind of became her biggest hit in her career up to that point, and definitely kind of made her a massive breakout star, even though she had been kind of building up momentum for the years before this. This album and this song specifically, You're No Good, were definitely the breakout moment for Linda Ronstadt's career. So here's You're No Good off the 1974 album Heart Like a Wheel.
I see how you really are. You're no good, you're no good.
Yeah, J.D. Souther had been producing some songs for her, and I think she was just getting so big by that time in '74 that's why they brought Asher. And I think they worked together, but I think they brought him in because he was such a big name at the time.
I mean, they definitely thought that Linda was getting to the point where she wanted someone who could kind of bring her that polished LA studio 1970s sound. And she definitely started having some major success. Like, she was starting to really start to choose exactly, I want to do this song or this, I want to do this song the exact way I want to do it. Real quick here before we play, I'm going to play both her version and the original version by Roy Orbison, but I'll play the Blue Bayou cut, especially too because not everyone can cover a Roy Orbison song. You're gonna have to be a once in a lifetime vocalist to really do that justice, especially in the way that Linda Ronstadt might. So here's Blue Bayou, written by Roy Orbison from his album In Dreams from 1963. So here's Blue Bayou by Roy Orbison.
I'm going back someday, gonna stay on Blue Bayou, where the folks are fine and the world is mine on Blue Bayou. Oh, that girl of mine by my side, the silver moon and the evening tide. Oh, some sweet day gonna take away this hurting inside.
So obviously a kind of early 60s classic, but I'm going to go right into Linda Ronstadt's version, which kind of became her signature song. Like, it's her most popular song on streaming services and everything these days, with almost 100 million plays. So here's Linda Ronstadt's version of Blue Bayou off one of her other biggest albums after her 1974 record. This is off of her 1977 album Simple Dreams, but here's Blue Bayou by Linda Ronstadt.
Heard that boy of mine by my side, the silver moon and the evening tide. Oh, some sweet day gonna take away this hurting inside. Will I never be blue? My dreams come true. I'm blue
Well, I happen to be a Roy Orbison fan, so, I don't think just anybody should cover a Roy Orbison song.
Oh, I would agree for sure.
His vocals are so unreal, so almost to a perfect level.
Definitely. I mean, he's definitely a vocalist. I would say could be considered a perfect vocalist for sure. Absolutely. And but I mean, I would kind of almost say the same about Linda Ronstadt. I mean, she's absolutely one of my favorite voices in all of music. I mean, I'm gonna play another cut just real quick. I'm only gonna play a few seconds of this one, but I'll probably just play like kind of the opening verse. But Linda Ronstadt is definitely one of the few artists, because I don't think there are that many artists out there that are like this. But I think if she really chooses the right song, really loves the song, I think potentially some of her performances can be even better than the original songs. I'm not going to say her version of Blue Bayou is better than Roy's. This might be a slightly controversial opinion, but she also, on the same Simple Dreams album, she has a cover of the Rolling Stones song Tumbling Dice. In my opinion, the definitive version of this song, I think it blows the water off of Mick Jagger's performance. But here's Linda Ronstadt's Tumbling Dice, and she actually changes the lyrics to the first verse pretty substantially just to kind of fit a her perspective instead of a Mick Jagger perspective. But here's her version of Tumbling Dice, one of my favorite performances of hers, absolutely. But here's her performance of Tumbling Dice from 1977, Simple Dreams.
People try to rape me, always think I'm crazy, make me burn the candle right down. Baby, I can't stay, I don't need you choosing my ground. Now I
All right, definitely a cool version of that song, but and a great cover. And Linda being really, I would say, at the height of her career at that point.
Oh, I would absolutely agree. I would definitely agree. And she was kind of by the end of the 70s, early 80s, she kind of got to the point like that album, Simple Dreams, I think kind of accomplished everything that she really wanted to accomplish in the kind of rock and pop music sphere. Like that Simple Dreams album was her third #1 album. So I think she kind of felt like, and she was never someone who was really into the celebrity lifestyle
Agreed.
and things like that. Like she actually moved out of Los Angeles in the early 90s because she didn't want to be around that celebrity lifestyle anymore. So she was never super about always wanting to be on top or anything. So after she had her kind of 3 or 4 albums that did the Billboard topping the charts numbers, she kind of got to the point where she's like, I can kind of just do the music that I really, really want to do. But real quick before I like, she started doing some jazz standards and even into some Latin music. But real quick before we get into that, I just kind of want to touch on one of her earliest, I guess, influencees. A lot of people might not exactly realize how much this artist was influenced by Linda Ronstadt, because most people just think of them as contemporaries because they were kind of they were both up and coming female artists in the 70s. But Stevie Nicks talks about a lot, and you can find a lot of interviews and things like that where Stevie Nicks talks about being in the late 60s when the Stone Poneys were having their kind of day in the sun. Stevie Nicks was in late high school, early college, like really just beginning her singing career. And she talks about how hearing Linda Ronstadt belt out different drum all over the radio was one of the main things that inspired Stevie Nicks to actually be like, well, hey, I could be a girl in a rock band, and I could be just as big of a star as all the guys I love and stuff like that. So Linda Ronstadt, I mean, I can't say for sure if we wouldn't have a Stevie Nicks or Fleetwood Mac without Linda Ronstadt, but different drum was definitely one of the major things that got Stevie Nicks kind of into where she felt like she needed to be to make some of her amazing music. So I'm going to play real quick just off Stevie Nicks' 1981 solo album, Belladonna, just Kind of Woman. One of the songs I feel like really kind of shows Linda Ronstadt's influence through Stevie's music. So here's Kind of Woman off of the 1981 album, Belladonna by Stevie Nicks.
That song, I think, really shows Stevie Nicks believing in her vocals like Linda Ronstadt and, just being all in on a song.
Absolutely, yeah,
just
definitely.
like Linda Ronstadt was.
Exactly. See, a lot of Stevie Nicks arrangements tend to be fairly maximalist. I mean, like Fleetwood Mac is a fairly maximalist band in terms of all the parts. And so I think a lot of Stevie's music kind of takes that aspect of Fleetwood Mac's production and things like that. But that song, Kind of Woman, is definitely a very bare, just like that finger-picked acoustic guitar and some strings and light percussion and things like that. So it really just makes way for Stevie's vocal in a way that a lot of Linda Ronstadt songs do for Linda, and actually kind of just talking about centering the vocal on a lot of Linda's songs, like and kind of the way that she started making music into the 80s was she just started working with whoever she wanted to work with, and she actually ended up making a span of albums with Nelson Riddle, who was actually like a very famed arranger and producer from the 40s and 50s, kind of making a lot of that early pop music, who she just like grew up listening. I guess a lot of the music that her mom would play when she was growing up were a lot of these just kind of jazz and kind of pop standards. So she made she made quite a few in the mid 80s kind of standards albums, and I'm going to play a song off of her 1986 standards album for sentimental reasons, and this song is actually the title track, I Love You for Sentimental Reasons, by Linda Ronstadt from her 1986 standards album, For Sentimental Reasons.
I think of you every morning, dream of you every night, darling, I'm never lonely, whenever you're inside, I love you for sentimental reasons. I hope you do believe me.
Sounds fantastic and really cool that she just decided, hey, I'm just going to do what I want to do.
Even though she's like, a lot of times whenever an artist decides to do that, it's kind of the record label's worst nightmare, because they're like, oh no, it's never going to sell. But her standards albums sold incredibly well. Like I think each one of her standards albums has gone platinum. Linda Ronstadt kind of just proved she could record whatever she wanted to, and it would still go over immensely well with listening audiences, especially in America. And actually, after her she recorded that string of standard albums in the mid '80s, she actually decided she wanted to. Her father, kind of going back to her early childhood. Her father was born in Mexico, and her family was very musical in that she would get those standards and all the Broadway pop and things like that from her mom, and then from her dad she would get all this really authentic mariachi and Mexican music. And so in 1987 she actually released her first entirely Spanish language album, Canciones de mi Padre. It's entirely in Spanish, and she had a few songs on some of her albums previously that had been in Spanish, like she had a couple Spanish language songs, but this was her first full release. Again, her record company was like, are you sure you want to do this? I'm not sure if anyone's going to buy a Spanish language album from Linda Ronstadt.
Right.
And it ended up actually becoming, for almost 5 or 6 years, the highest selling non-English speaking album in United States recording history. So here's Por un Amor, For a Love, the first track off of that Canciones de mi Padre. So here you go, Por un Amor.
Pobre de mí, esta vida mejor que se acabe no es para mí. Pobre de mí, ay corazón, pobre de mí.
Yeah, and it's hard to comprehend how many young artists that album had an impact on and influenced.
It actually sort of led to one of the most surprising, or maybe not surprising, but one of the influences that I guess one might not think of immediately when they think of Linda Ronstadt's influence on music and the music industry. But that album actually had a pretty major impact on Selena Quintanilla's career, the Latin American pop singer from the late 80s and early 90s. Her father, Abraham Quintanilla, was kind of Selena's manager throughout the entirety of her career, and was one of the kind of major influences in her actually deciding to pursue music in any capacity. But Abraham was actually initially one of the things that actually initially kind of led Abraham to be like, oh wow, Selena could actually be a major crossover artist, was him kind of hearing Linda Ronstadt's Spanish-speaking albums and being like, wow, this is an artist I normally grew up with being like on pop radio and everything, and now she's got this amazing Spanish music. Like maybe my daughter could kind of almost do the opposite and start by making a bunch of amazing Spanish music and kind of transferring into becoming an incredible pop artist. And following Linda's kind of formula was definitely a major influence in the kind of the beginnings of Selena's career. So I'm going to play Se Una Vez off of Amor Prohibido from 1994, the Selena Quintanilla track, one of my favorite songs from Selena. and a major hit for this album, Amor Prohibido. So here's Si una vez.
Si una vez dije que te amaba, ay me arrepiento. Si una vez dije que te amaba, no sé lo que pensé, estaba loca. Si una vez dije que te amaba y que por ti la vida daba. Si una vez dije que te amaba, no lo vuelvo a hacer. Ese error es cosa de ayer.
Well, obviously, Selena was a huge star, and really cool to think about Linda Ronstadt being a major influence of hers.
Definitely. And I mean, Selena is, along with Linda Ronstadt, one of my favorite all-time vocalists. Like, they would both probably be in a top 10 list if I was going to make a top 10 list of incredible vocalists. And so it's very cool to kind of see the way that other artists can shape other artists, even in ways that one might not normally even think of. Kind of back to Linda Ronstadt's career in the late 80s. Actually, this album came out in the same year as her Spanish language album, but again, kind of following Linda's just kind of desire to just make music exactly how she wants to make music. In 1987, she formed kind of her first the only group she's been in since the Stone Poneys. Her group it's an unofficial title, I suppose, but it's just called Trio, between Linda Ronstadt, Emmylou Harris, and Dolly Parton. Kind of two of her longest friends. They had been, her and Dolly Parton and Emmylou Harris had been friends and collaborators since the 70s. So for over 10 years at that, by this point in 1987, Trio had again major success in the country music charts and kind of relaunched Linda Ronstadt as a major player in the country music scene that had actually changed by the early 90s and late 80s, had changed drastically since Linda was making her first country music and country rock in the early 70s. So here is To Know Him Is to Love Him off of the 1987 album Trio by Dolly Parton, Linda Ronstadt, and Emmylou Harris. Quite the trio of vocalists there, but here's To Know Him Is to Love Him.
Had been kind of a thrill for the three of them. I mean, them influencing each other over the years.
Oh, absolutely.
And then to get together in a trio, I mean, that must have been just awesome.
They actually did a couple of albums. There's that first album is just called Trio, and then I believe there's an album that they did in the mid to late 90s just called Trio 2. And yeah, that Trio group is actually where Linda Ronstadt has actually said in interviews that she's happiest with her voice on those Trio albums. Like she feels like she was at her best as a singer and as a vocalist and performer on those albums she made with Dolly and Emmylou. So that probably also just goes to show the musical collaboration and musical relationship that those three were able to have.
Definitely.
And there's some really cool words. If you look up, because in 2019, Linda Ronstadt received the Kennedy Honors Award, kind of one of the biggest awards that a musician can receive in the U.S. And Emmylou Harris comes out and kind of does her induction speech and everything, and you can see Linda Ronstadt getting really emotional during Emmylou's speech. So it really just goes to show they have a pretty incredible friendship, and there's a lot of love in that music. And that definitely that album Trio, which definitely kind of brought Linda back to the forefront of kind of the country music and kind of alternative country songwriter and singer-songwriter circles that she was kind of initially famous in. That definitely made a lot of her influence into the 90s and early 2000s a lot more apparent in artists like Sheryl Crow and Carrie Underwood and a lot of the kind of more modern singer-songwriter and country style vocalist.
Definitely.
So I'm going to play Strong Enough by Sheryl Crow off her 1993 album. And Sheryl Crow has been a long-time Linda Ronstadt fan and kind of advocate. Definitely talks up her influence a lot in her music. So here's Strong Enough by Sheryl Crow from 1993.
Cannot show. I make the rules up as I go. Just try and love me if you can. Are you strong enough to be my man? My man. Are you strong enough to be my man? Are you strong enough to be my man? Are you strong enough, my man? When I've shown you that I just don't care. When I'm doing
Yeah, great song off a equally great album by Sheryl Crow, and definitely can hear the influence coming through from Linda Ronstadt.
And I kind of, I guess this is a sort of another, obviously very modern or fairly modern country artist that's talked a lot about his the influence that he takes from Linda Ronstadt. But Vince Gill actually talks a lot about in multiple interviews how one of the ways that he likes to, when he's writing a song or when he's working on a song or anything like that, he actually, one of the things that he likes to do is actually try to imagine Linda Ronstadt's vocal on the song. If he can do that and kind of just spend a second kind of picturing Linda Ronstadt singing the song, then he can get up on the mic and deliver what he thinks is a fantastic vocal
Wow.
performance. So it's definitely not necessarily, I mean, like a lot of the people who tend to talk up a lot of Linda Ronstadt's influence tend to be people who either knew her or were like in the studio with her at one point. So it's kind of cool to see like a fairly new at that time in the mid 90s country artist kind of being like, yeah, whenever I'm trying to write a song, I like to kind of imagine what it would be like through Linda Ronstadt's eyes. So here's Go Rest High on That Mountain off of the 1994 album When Love Finds You by Vince Gill. But you can definitely hear the kind of way that he is definitely thinking of his songs almost as if like Linda Ronstadt was performing the song. But here's Go Rest High on That Mountain by Vince Gill.
Wish I could see angels' faces when they hear your sweet voice sing. So go rest high on that mountain, son, your work on earth is done.
Yeah, we made a similar comment about Stevie Nicks, really kind of putting it all behind her vocals and the song. And you hear that with Vince Gill right there as
Oh,
well.
definitely.
Really neat to think about him actually picturing, Linda Ronstadt, like thinking about how she would do it.
Oh yeah, definitely.
That's
I
an
mean,
enormous influence.
definitely, and it's definitely he definitely talks about the way that her voice shaped the way that he sings. Absolutely, and
Mhm.
I wouldn't be too surprised. I mean, I don't know entirely all the politics that go behind their decisions, but Vince Gill has also kind of recently been the kind of the draft pick on the Eagles to sub in for Glenn Frey post
Right.
Glenn Frey's passing, and I wouldn't be too surprised if that Linda Ronstadt connection was definitely
Yeah, I could see
a
that.
way that they kind of were able to bring Vince Gill kind of successfully into the Eagles unit.
Mhm.
I wouldn't be surprised if that was definitely a talking point and point of connection for them. I kind of bring it into the I guess more modern musical sphere a little bit. So one of the artists from the last like decade or so that's been very, very vocal about their love for Linda Ronstadt and their influence that they've taken from her is the rock band HAIM, the three sisters out of LA who kind of have their own their own rock band, Danielle, Esty, and Alana Haim. They've been active since kind of around 2010, 2011 or so. But they talk a lot about in various interviews how when they were kids they had a band with their parents. They would play shows or they would play parties and stuff, and a lot of the songs that they would cover as their little family band would be Linda Ronstadt songs. And they actually have even as old as older women in actually HAIM, they've covered "You're No Good" a few times, and they definitely say that that's one of their favorite songs to kind of just break out if they want to have a band practice or they haven't practiced in a while and they need to break out a song that's just going to get them going and get them grooving. They'll break out "You're No Good." So I want to play a song off their most recent album, Women in Music Part 3, which came out in actually just this past year, 2021. And this song is just called "The Steps" by HAIM from their 2021 album, Women in Music Part 3. But they are definitely kind of one of the more modern stepping stones for Linda Ronstadt's influence in kind of pop music and the way that she's kind of been a ever-growing presence on the music industry. So here's "The Steps" by HAIM.
Good pick with HAIM, and I think it's probably an understatement to say that we've only scratched the surface.
Definitely.
People who have been influenced, artists been influenced by Linda Ronstadt.
Absolutely, but I mean, we don't want to take up too much more time, and we've kind of traced a lot of her kind of general career, but I want to leave you guys with a song that kind of, it goes back to what the beginnings of what would become Trio. It's a song off her Simple Dreams album, I Will Never Marry, and it actually features Dolly Parton on harmony vocals, and I think this is one of their first recorded collaborations. So I thought that would be a nice way to kind of end off the Linda Ronstadt episode with a nice duet between her and Dolly Parton. So thank you guys so much for listening to our episode of Influenced. And this has been Linda Ronstadt. And I've been Blake Sokoloff.
And I'm Robert Dean.
And said thank you guys so much for listening. Here's I Will Never Marry from Simple Dreams from 1977 by Linda Ronstadt and Dolly Parton.
I never will marry. I'll be no man's wife. I expect to live single all the days of my life. Well, the train pulled out, the whistle blew with a long